Everyone, Temporal here, and for this session, we are covering power rankings. We have our power rankings. These are my newest power rankings. We're looking at Activision Blizzard Collegiate teams here. Just came out of Swiss play, so we did 8 rounds, 2 rounds per weekend of these teams mixing it up. Mostly if you go 2-0, you go up against a couple 2-0 teams the next weekend, that sort of thing. We're out of 8 rounds of that, and we are now into group stages. We will take a look at the groups at the end of this. I may end up doing a separate video. I'll probably end up doing a separate video talking about the groups. Look out for that one tomorrow. Feel free to subscribe if you want to make sure you see those. But today we are looking at the power rankings that we have as the end of our Swiss stages here. Here are what we had in our most recent power rankings before that. So we can see a few things have moved around. And even though 32 different teams from each division, West and East, did qualify for group stages here, we've only put about 30 teams into our power rankings. Because the reality is, well, there's probably about 50, maybe 60 4K plus teams in Collegiate Overwatch. There's kind of a fall off. Once you get below about 4.3, we'll say, about that range, it really becomes, okay, who's going to win on any given day? We're really just not going to go that much. There's another 30 teams that we'd be looking at if we looked, really below about 4.3K there. So we're looking at our top 30 or so teams here. So what happened? Why did we move people around? Well, we've got a couple things to talk about that were exciting in that final weekend of Swiss play. So first off, Harrisburg, they took down Bay State. And you might go, okay, taking down Bay State. Harrisburg took down Bay State. Sounds good. Makes sense. That's cool. Why is Bay State up here then, as opposed to maybe further down? And did that really drive Harrisburg to the top? Well, yes. Yes, it did. Because Harrisburg, on top of taking down Bay State, as well as, doing what they're supposed to, they've also beat Lords, Converse, Mystery Machine, couple things like that. We also saw Bay State fell Northwood. So we're now putting Northwood. Northwood lost to one of the top 5 teams. We're not moving them down a tier, but we are putting Northwood at the back of this. Could they instead be over here? Yeah, they could be in that 3rd spot instead. But since we're looking at NACE, since we're looking at ABC, since that's mostly what we've seen, if I'm aware of other tournaments, that's fine. But what I'm aware of there is, hey, Maryville and ISU haven't really lost to other teams in these Big 5. We're going to go ahead and keep them here ahead of Northwood because Northwood's sort of in an undecided spot there. When we move on from there, ISU did beat University of Texas Dallas and Boise. So we see here's UTD, here's Boise. They got both of those wins. Yep, makes sense. That helps reinforce that they belong in this top 5 tier. And then we've also got ISU went ahead and also ISU beat up on University of Texas Dallas and Boise. And then Maryville beat up on UCI and Grand Canyon University. So Grand Canyon, all 3 of these fell to these 2. Cool, makes sense. We're going to go ahead and prop these guys up here. Northwood was able to take down Converse, Lords, Mystery Machine, but did take that loss to Bay State like we talked about. So all 5 of these teams, absolutely still top tier teams. I would not be remotely surprised to see Northwood when maybe their players are fully there. They're not in a situation where maybe people are traveling, something like that. I would not be at all surprised to see Northwood bounce back and maybe flip that the next time that these 2 came head to head, or really any of these 5 teams winning it. Then we move on to our next tier. This will round out our top 8. And in here, we're going to see UCI, University of Texas Dallas, and SCAD. And was there really any movement here? No, this tier didn't have any movement. UCI did what they were supposed to. They beat Boise. They've also got wins against Illinois Orange, UCLA, UW Stout. They did lose to Maryville, like we said there. We would have expected them to lose to Maryville. Okay, that pretty much makes sense. University of Texas Dallas, they took out Bellevue. Okay, Bellevue. Bellevue last tier list was a bit down more in this range. Now they're up here. Either way, we would have expected University of Texas Dallas to beat up on them without too much trouble. And then Tamu Maroon, I believe that's their lead team, was 6-0, so they did end up pulling University of Texas Dallas. Tamu Maroon is not that quality of team, as best I can tell, to have been 6-0. They just, sort of got lucky in the matchup draw, so University of Texas had to put them down and did so quite easily, I'd imagine. Brings us over to SCAD, who did take down UF Orange. Taking down UF Orange, absolutely within SCAD's reach. UF Orange were top 16 last season, are still in our very next tier here. Makes sense, they went down, but they're a good team to reinforce that SCAD probably does belong up here. But they did also take that loss to Bay State, as we saw there. So, hey, they had a win, a loss, that's how that's going to go. They had lost the previous weekend. But that's what we're looking at there. So then we move on to our Dark Horse tier. And you guys may notice that I've moved up Boise State a bit here. Most of that's going to be from feedback, from what I'm gathering, from what I'm seeing, that sort of thing. If we look at what they did beat Bellevue. They did beat Grand Canyon. If we look at where those schools are, Bellevue is now right here. Grand Canyon is now right here. Okay, so that's weird. How did Boise move up so much? Well, some of that's going to be off of feedback. Some of that, and Boise didn't move up a ton. The much bigger move is actually Bellevue. Bellevue has moved up here, and that sort of helped prop Boise up a little bit further. So what did Bellevue do? Well, Bellevue beat the Banana Slugs, UC Santa Cruz. I didn't actually expect that one to go that way. I have a guess of what happened and that Santa Cruz kind of got caught, but I didn't expect that one to go that way. Regardless, Bellevue got that win over UC Santa Cruz, and that does elevate them from down in this area up to here. It also pushes Boise ahead of UC Santa Cruz as well because, hey, Boise was able to take down Bellevue there. Okay, no big surprise. That makes a fair amount of sense. We've also seen that that they have a loss to, like we said, the loss to Boise, and then the loss to University of Texas Dallas as well. So they can't go any higher than this. This is about their upper limit, but this is about their lower limit unless UC Santa Cruz were to fall further. Speaking of which, does UC Santa Cruz belong here? Well, they beat Utah, they beat Grandview, they beat UW Stout. If we look at where these teams are, they beat Grandview, they beat Utah. These teams used to be up in this tier. We've since dropped them, and we actually dropped them based on what happened. We'll get to them when we get to them. They've since dropped. That means UC Santa Cruz has a little less reason to be supported up here. Perhaps the bottom supporting this team has fallen out a little bit, and this team needs to come down a little bit. But they didn't take any losses that they weren't supposed to. They did take perhaps the loss that they weren't supposed to Bellevue, but their other losses to University of Texas Dallas, they finished 6-2. 6-2, lots of weaker teams finish 6-2, but we look at that and go, hey, their losses aren't really two terrible teams. We're not going to knock them as far as we ended up knocking these two, Utah, who did take the rough loss to Grandview there. Okay, so moving on from here, we have Converse. Converse is in the Eastern Division. They have wins over the Ucf Knights here. They've also got wins over Kennesaw, which is going to be right over here. Okay, makes sense. Converse wins with two wins over teams in the lower tier, one lower tier there. Sure, they're going to go ahead and continue to hang out here. Is there an argument that, hey, maybe they should be over here? They didn't lose to anyone they shouldn't? Yeah, absolutely. You could absolutely place them there. This tier, obviously, we know the order of these three within this tier. Maybe Santa Cruz falls further, maybe it doesn't. Converse maybe should be over here. Florida maybe should be over here. Really hard to know perfectly, but we do have a pretty good feeling that this tier, with the possible exception of this that doesn't have the greatest support in the world, its support is pretty far back in the next tier, is in pretty good shape. Smash the like button. Thank you, Val. Yes, absolutely. Make sure to smash the like button. Then as we move on to UF, University of Florida, they did go ahead. This is another Florida team. We have one Florida team here, and we have another Florida team down here. And this Florida's team support for being here is, well, they did beat their Florida counterpart, so good on them for that. They also beat Kennesaw, so this team right over here, and then they also got their win off of Miami, Ohio, who is right over here. So they've got wins against three of the teams in that next tier down. Looks pretty good to me. We're going to go ahead and lock University of Florida Orange, those Gators, in this slot right here. So that brings us on to our next tier, and that finishes out top 13. So now we're moving into our next tier here. And in our next tier, we're going to throw up Lords. Lords has a rough record. Lords is going to have a bad seed going into groups. Lords ended up in what I'm going to pretty safely call the death group because they got a bad seed. They're in there with Converse. They're in there with a top 5 team, I believe. They're in there with probably like 2 more teams that are threatening. That is a dicey group. But when we look at Lords, we see they have a win against Northeastern. They have a win against UCF. They have a loss to Bay State, Northwood, and Harrisburg. So what's that give us? Bay State, Northwood, Harrisburg. And then we'll give a different color. Their wins against Northwood, UCF, and what was I getting there? Not Northwood, Northeastern, UCF, and that's going to work. So they're about where they should be again, where we look at this and go, hey, we don't know how much higher they could go because their 3 losses are all to top 5 teams, but they have wins against other teams within what we're calling their tier here. And, that's going to be solid. That's going to do it. Not much else they can do there. Could they maybe be up in this next row here, up with Florida? Yeah, they absolutely potentially could be here. But this is roughly where we're going to put them for now. We know that, hey, their ceiling is not quite as high as the Big 5 up there, but we can see that, even if they have 3 losses, rough losses to get, those are going to be, hey, they're still looking good. They've still got good competitive wins over solid teams here. The seeding gods hate us. That's Coach Pioneer for Lords over there. I'm sorry, Coach Pioneer. It's not fair. It's not fair. You see, UF got themselves. UF was a 6-0 team that managed to not pull any 6-0 teams, and then you guys went and get three matches against top 5 teams. What are you gonna do? Something's maybe a little wacky with game battles there, or maybe chance just doesn't like you. But we'll go ahead and move on to our next team here, and that is going to be Northeastern. Northeastern is actually in a situation where they've both won and lost to Miami, Ohio. In ABC, about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, they actually lost to Miami, Ohio, but then actually earlier today in ESC, they just beat Miami, Ohio. So they've gone back and forth, but the more recent one is the Northeastern win there. And since I coach for Northeastern, I will happily take the more recent win there. They've also beat Akron twice. They beat up Mystery Machine, who we see down here. They beat up the Scarlet Squires, who would probably be in this slot. That's Rutgers' second team. It might be down here somewhere in the not rated slot, but we would see them. Rutgers, Scarlet Squires got themselves a pretty easy bracket path and went 7-1 with their one loss being to Northeastern. Doesn't really matter. The point that we're looking at here is, hey, we have a couple things to prop this up. The most obvious being, hey, they did manage to beat Miami, Ohio there, even if they also lost to Miami, Ohio. And then we move on to the next one. Miami, Ohio, again, also has that flip where they beat Northeastern before losing to Northeastern, so they're going to continue to live in this same place. They've also beat Akron twice. I believe Akron went 6-2, maybe 5-3, and then dropped out of the tournament. Doesn't really matter. They're about a 4-3 team, that sort of thing. They also beat Boston. They lost to UF Orange, like we talked about there. So yeah, that's about what we're looking at. They've got a little bit to support this. Makes sense. Nothing too wild. Then from there, we are into Kennesaw. And Kennesaw actually makes this pretty easy. Kennesaw beat UCF. Great. Kennesaw beats UCF. Get to put them right here. That's nice as easy. That's what we like to see. Cool. Kennesaw also went ahead and lost to UF Orange. Okay, cool. That's one tier up. Makes sense. And they lost to Miami, Ohio, like we said there. Then they have a win, I believe. They've also got a win against Rutgers over here. So we see that. They've got the loss to the 2 teams that we've got ahead of them. They've got wins against 2 teams behind them. One of the teams we're going to put just behind them. Well, how can we put it just behind them? Well, that's pretty easy. Let's talk about this team. Ucf Knights, they went ahead and beat up on Penn State, which is going to be the team right behind them. So we've pulled a nice little order mostly for these teams here. Ucf Knights did beat Penn State. They also lost to Lords. So we've got that. Okay, makes sense. And they lost to UF Orange, and they lost to, excuse me, am I still on Kennesaw? Yes. Sorry, I got a little bit, I was on Kennesaw there. My apologies. UCF Knights, we were just on them. Beat Penn State, lost to Lorge, lost to UF Orange, lost to Kennesaw. Okay, so they're losing to these teams they're losing to these teams ahead of them, but they did get that win against Penn State. Was Penn State maybe having some roster issue then? Maybe, I don't know. I've heard rumors of that. We tend not to give roster issues too much weight. If you field the team, you fielded the team. If you forfeit, you forfeited. So, we sort of go with, hey, not too much weight on those things. But ultimately, they do have the win over Penn State. They have losses to a bunch of people ahead of them on this list. That's why they are here. Speaking of Penn State does have a win over Rutgers. Penn State also has a win over Griffin Gaming, GMU, and then they have a loss to UCF and Bay State. So Bay State, no surprise there, and then that loss to UCF. So that's what they've got. They don't maybe have the most support in the world for being right here. Their win, in terms of the thing propping them up, is a tier down and quite a bit back in this tier down. Maybe they fall off harder than this. Really hard to know if they should be more in this range as opposed to up here. From there, we move on to Grandview. Grandview is in the Western Division. They did beat Utah, and that's actually what led to Utah's precipitous fall from the heights up here. Utah was good last season. Yes, they graduated some players, but they were sort of getting the benefit of the doubt until this loss to Grandview. And you might say, oh, well, Grandview might be really, really good. Grandview also beat UW, so Grandview could be a good team. Well, UW is down in that next tier right now. If UW was a little higher, that might help Grandview, but it's not here. They also beat CU Boulder, but CU Boulder forfeited like half their matches and didn't end up making playoffs. A shame. CU Boulder did beat UCLA earlier in the Swiss play, if memory serves, but they forfeited like half their matches. So they had like a 4-4 record or something along those lines. So a win over a 4-4 team isn't really going to help them very much. And then they do have the loss to UC Santa Cruz. So no, we can't do a ton with this. We can't really place them massively ahead of where they are here. Could they be a little bit higher up? Yeah, they could be, but we know UC Santa Cruz is the absolute top here. Okay. Then we move on to Utah. Utah hasn't really given us anything interesting this season. They beat Rebel Gaming. They beat Davis. They lost to UC Santa Cruz. They lost to Grandview. Okay, that tells us a little bit of what we need to know. They need to be behind Grandview. Maybe Grandview could be up here right behind UC Santa Cruz. Little tough to justify that, but hey, there is some range that they could be better than. This seems to be about where they go. Could Utah fall a little bit further? Yeah, Utah might fall a little bit further. Again, those biggest wins over Rebel Gaming, UC Davis, those teams aren't going to make our top 30 here. So from here, we move on to UCLA, and UCLA beat Grand Canyon University, they beat OU Crimson, they beat Cal, they lost to CU Boulder, who we said was a bit all over the place, and they lost to UC Irvine. So not a ton we can do with that, but they are going to be the top of our good teams category. Obviously, a loss to UC Irvine, not a ton you can do with that. There was simply no way that they were going to be able to compete. Grand Canyon University win, okay, that makes sense. They've also got the win over CU Boulder, who doesn't make it onto our list, and the win over UW, which, hey, or excuse me, no, I have the wrong thing highlighted in my notes. I apologize. I'm making more mistakes than usual today. They've also got the win over OU Crimson, who also doesn't quite make it onto our list here. Win over Cal. Lots of wins over teams that don't quite make it onto our top 30 list is basically, as well as the win over GCU, is putting them at the top of our good teams tier in about, I believe this is the 22nd spot here. GCU, we've got really nothing to give them. Grand Canyon University, Okay, great. They beat UNT twice, but UNT we don't know what's going on with. UNT did okay record-wise in ABC, but they seemed to be losing everything to kind of nobody teams in NACE, so maybe they were having forfeit issues, but we do hold forfeit issues against you, because if you're having a lot of forfeit issues, nothing says that you have the consistency to win and are therefore more expected to win in an upcoming match, because you've been having forfeit issues elsewhere. But we have to put them somewhere. We're going to go ahead and put them here. Tamu, again, they had that 6-0 going into the last weekend there of Swiss play, but they did then get tough matches and lose those tough matches. They do have wins against Hawaii and Iowa, as well as Cal, but then they lost to University of Texas, Dallas, and Boise. So we really have no idea where these guys actually belong because, okay, they lost to Boise and University of Texas, Dallas. Well, those teams are way up there. So are these guys better? Well, maybe, but if we look at their wins are to Iowa, okay. Their wins are to Cal, okay, and to Hawaii. Those teams aren't really better than like 4-2. To be perfectly honest. So maybe they're good. Maybe they're not. Really tough to know where these guys sit right now. Okay. And then we move on to UW, and UW beat Iowa. We talked about them. Beat San Diego State University, which would be probably, it's not UCSD, it's a different San Diego. California has the state system and the UC system. UCSD is the stronger school of those two, but UCSD probably would have been, or not UCSD, San Diego State University probably would be in the top 40 or so as about a GM team there. So, okay, they went ahead and got that win. They got the win over Iowa. Then they lost to University of Texas, Dallas and to Grandview. So, Texas, Dallas, we just can't expect them to hold up against. And then Grandview, okay, that's a little more support for where our Grandview is. That makes sense to us. From here, we get to move on to Mystery Machine. And if all of you are curious what school Mystery Machine is, according to their players, they are Pittsburgh. I tend to believe their players. So yeah, that is Pittsburgh. But you know what? Since they operate under Mystery Machine, we're going to put a Mystery Machine logo up here because why not? They did miss out on playoffs just barely, or excuse me, on group stages just barely last season. They have made it this season. They got a win over Toronto Blue. Okay, Toronto Blue. We know about what that team is. Probably about 4-1, something in that range. Drexel Dragons, who I believe finished 6-2. They lost to Northeastern, to Harrisburg, to Northwood. So we really don't know where to put them because, okay, Northeastern's up here. They're going to as well lose to Harrisburg and as well lose to Northwood. There's no way that they can compete with Harrisburg or Northwood. We never would have expected them to. Northeastern helps ground them a little bit, so we know that their cap would be up in this range over here, but then their wins aren't quite giving us a ton. Their wins are going to go, okay, we know that you're better than Toronto Blue, who didn't make our top 30. We know you're better than Drexel Dragons, who didn't make our top 30. Even if some of these teams went like 6-2, they're not really top 30 teams. So this is where we're going to put them, right behind UW here. As we move on from here, we've got UCSD. They beat Illinois Orange, and hey, that's great. Illinois Orange was top 16 last season, so a win over them is great, but Illinois Orange doesn't look to be quite that good this season. They also got wins against Rebel Gaming, and then they took losses to Boise, as well as to University of Texas, Dallas. Seems Boise and University of Texas, Dallas ended a lot of people's dreams. And maybe we're wrong. Maybe Illinois Orange are that good again. Maybe Illinois Orange absolutely belong higher on this list. But we are going to see here that, what was I saying? We are going to see here, this could be a case of, hey, Illinois Orange is about as good as last season, and UCSD is quite a bit better this season. UCSD has really put it on. I do think this is a good version of UCSD that has shown up compared to last season, at least. We don't really know because, hey, they're better than Illinois Orange, but they have, hey, we're going to get blocked out by these things. There's not a ton that we can do there. Moving on to Illinois Orange. Illinois Orange didn't give us much to work with. They beat UW Stout. They beat CU Boulder. They lost to Redbirds. They lost to UC Irvine. But then they also lost to Pizza Pirates and UCSD, like we said. So a win over Illinois Orange. Illinois Orange doesn't look quite as strong this season. UCSD could be. Maybe UCSD is top 16 quality this season. Maybe that's what we'll see out of them. But we really don't know yet. Because beating Illinois Orange, when Illinois Orange has losses to Minnesota, when they have losses to UCSD, which again, we don't know the upper limit of either, we're going to have to go ahead and put them back here. That brings us over to Rutgers. Rutgers is back in the mix, and Rutgers have wins against Red Orange and Boston. Boston is like a 4K team, if memory serves. Red Orange did pretty well. They got to NACE playoffs last season, if memory serves, but this season I'm seeing how they're mixing it up. That probably looks to be like a 4.1K team based on who they're up against, what they're doing. Red Orange did lose to Rutgers' second team, for example, their Scarlet Squires as well, if memory serves, or maybe they lost to Toronto Blue, who lost to Scarlet Squires. I don't remember exactly my pathing on that, but we look at that. Hey, that's going to tell us we have what we have here. Rutgers' main team. We're looking at them. They beat Red Orange. They beat Boston. They lost to Penn State. They lost to Kennesaw. So if we look at that, we see Penn State up here. We see Kennesaw over here. Rutgers, the top end, there might be quite a bit of range for them to be better, but they haven't proven that they're in that better range. And then their wins are over about maybe 4.1K cap team. So we're going to have to really see what they can do. And then I'm hesitant to put UNT here, but I think I'd be wrong not to. I didn't put Colorado here. CU, I could have thought, they might actually be, in terms of their strength, the stronger team, just like University of South Carolina might be a stronger team that belongs in the top 30 based on their strength. But there's just too many forfeits to those teams. South Carolina did qualify, if memory serves. CU Boulder did not. But UNT did qualify, and while they have those rough forfeits, they are all over in NACE. So, at least I believe they're forfeits. Maybe they just were losses, which is a little weird, but they did okay here. If we look at what they actually done, they beat UA Crimson, they beat UC Riverside, they lost to Bellevue, they lost to Grand Canyon University. So we see that, okay, they were never going to hold up to Bellevue, but Grand Canyon University, okay, they definitely don't belong much higher than this. That said, they're not weak when they do show up. So they are going to make the last slot in our list. And that's pretty much going to do it. I'm not going to go ahead and cover the groups in this video. I'll probably do that in a video tomorrow. But if you guys have questions, go ahead and throw them up in chat and let me know. Let me know what you guys think. So we see here, smash the like button. Okay, yeah, definitely. Smash the like button. Thank you, Val. Sam is fam says, let's go. Thank you, Sam. Coach Panier's unhappy about the seating. How does the budget of each college compare? I couldn't possibly tell you that. I could not possibly tell you what each school's budget for esports looks like, because I don't know, and that would be way too hard to go track down. I mean, we have to do things like go track down what is Mystery Machine, what school is that associated with, or OW1, what school is that associated with. We don't know when we're competing against a school always in this tournament. Are they a varsity squad or are they a club squad? Does their school even know that they're fielding a squad? That sort of thing. So I really don't know. I do know that Speakeasy and the Collegiate Overwatch group, Cow, has put together, if you want to follow them on Twitter, has put together a sort of scholarship offerings thing where they'll list, for the schools that have listed it, have volunteered that information. They'll list what sort of the maximum or average scholarship information available is, if they have a full-time or a part-time staff associated with the team, how many people they have in esports, that sort of thing. That might sort of get you the answer, but not everyone is going to volunteer that information, because not everyone wants to be super transparent with their scholarship information, because, that can lead to bidding wars, things like that the schools don't necessarily want. FCB says Northeastern next tier. Do you mean Northeastern should be up in this tier, or do you mean Northeastern should be down in this tier? Because it's going to be a really tough sell that Northeastern should be down in this tier. That's just going to be a tough sell. They did trade wins with Miami, Ohio here. Miami, Ohio, has had their messiness in terms of, hey, where's this going to go? They lost to UF Florida, but that's their worst loss, so they don't really have a reason to go lower than this. Northeastern's worst losses to really Miami, Ohio. You could say Lords, but we're putting Lords ahead of Miami, Ohio. I don't think there's a reason to put them down a tier. I think if you were to put them up a tier, you'd have to go like this, and you'd have to grab these 3, maybe these 4, and put them up a tier, but I don't particularly have a need to do that. We'll have to see as the season goes on, is there distance between the end of this tier and the beginning of this tier? And I don't know yet. We haven't seen enough stuff. Yeah, I can't wait for the group preview video. Absolutely. We'll make sure to get that out tomorrow. I expect it to be a fun one. But I think that's going to do it. If you guys are enjoying the content, please do drop a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't already so you can see more stuff like this. We do cover the collegiate scene here. We do other stuff on this channel as well, but we do cover the collegiate scene. Will there be a detailed Northeastern match breakdown vid, or is it top secret? I mean, I did one not that long ago. When I talked about, I actually grabbed some of the stuff from the Lords versus Northeastern match. I grabbed some of the stuff from that, since that was cast, and I went ahead and detailed how the dive comp, the ball comp, plays into both Lords' bunker as well as Lords' brawl stuff there. So, I know you might want more, but that was a pretty good one. Not every match that Northeastern has is a fantastic match for teaching from, because you have to remember in the collegiate scene, you get some matches, good matches, like Northeastern versus Lords, like Northeastern versus Miami, Ohio, but you get other matches that are going to be more one-sided. Okay, Northeastern is going to go just quickly beat up on a team today because that's what ESC requires, or ABC requires, that sort of thing. Or, okay, Northeastern is up against ISU or Bay State, and, they're going to try. Northeastern is going to absolutely put it in there, but it's tough to, even get a map to go our way in those situations. So it's tough to really give great examples from some of those things. But that's fine. That's fine. So there will probably be more Northeastern stuff, because they do give good examples that I can educate stuff with on this channel. But really, if you want to see Northeastern stuff, watch the Northeastern live streams of the matches or watch things like this. But that's going to do it. I will see you guys in the next one. And yeah, that'll do it.